Welcome into the Trial Technology Litigation Support Podcast. Rob Helt here with you, and we are going to spend a little bit of time today. And this is going to be one of the longer podcasts. I'm not going to split it into two parts. Last week, I was in Phoenix, Arizona, actually in Scottsdale, for iPro Innovations. And from top to bottom, I was extremely impressed. I've been to a lot of conferences over the years. And never have I been to one quite like this. My wife and I flew in on Monday, and Monday afternoon we looked around the facility at Talking Stick Resort. We checked in, and iPro was giving out T-shirts and pins and these Ogio backpacks that were wonderful. They gave out all this stuff. The vendors were getting set up, and then at 5:30, all hell broke loose. They had the Top Golf kickoff party. If you've never been to Top Golf, Google it, take a look at what it is. We were down on the bottom floor. It's where you can play golf. You can in this little Target golf environment. You can drink. You can socialize. They had wonderful food. They provided all the food, all the refreshments, all the drinks. Everything was provided by iPro, and it was absolutely wonderful. So this show is going to be tidbits and things I recorded from the show with my Zoom H4n. Now, I will say that when it was very loud, we were getting a little closer to the mic, and so you hear some of those pee-pops and all those things, but just if you'll bear with it, the sound will get better as we go through. Several people are going to be on this podcast. I'll set them up and introduce kind of what you're going to listen to. But let me take you back to the Top Golf Kickoff, where we talked with Tim Piganelli and Kim Taylor. Both have been guests on the show. And we talked a little bit about what was going on there. So let's take a listen to the Top Golf Kickoff Party Monday night, first night of iPro Innovations.
I got to tell you, Kim, we're sitting here. We're at Top Golf. I got Tim Piganelli. I got Kim Taylor. Kim, what do you think about this turnout? 15 years. This is the 15th year.
15
you guys
years.
have been doing this.
You bet.
What do you think about the turnout, man?
Well, it's a record turnout, 150 people more than last year. But it's also the quality. Look, I'm talking to Tim Piganelli. He's a legend in the industry himself, so it's awesome.
I mean, we all aspire to be like Pig.
Someday we could.
Let me ask you, Piganelli, you've been coming out to this thing. You do a lot of e-discovery. What do you feel like is the most beneficial thing of what iPro's doing with innovations?
Well, we were just talking about the Allegro, what he's doing with some of the ECA, the analytics. I'm late to the party. Kim knows, and he's disappointed in me, but it's a tool that we all need to jump on board. I'm excited that I finally can sell a product to a client for $750 or $800 to give them a solution for that middle management guy. But they're making waves. They're doing things right. They're dotting the I's. They're crossing the T's. And those of us that are in the business that want tools that work, I'm excited about it. So I'm late to the party, but I'm here now, and I'm excited.
Well, Kim, let me ask you, if you look around, if you want to talk about experience in the industry, knowledge in the industry, there's a lot of horsepower here.
Oh yeah, like I said, the quantity is one thing, but it's the quality. If you go up and down this golf bay, it is amazing of the level, and it's really corporations, law firms, service bureau, government agency, consultants, trainers. It's literally a good cross-section of the industry, of who's who, and it's exciting to be a part of it.
Well, it's definitely fun stuff. Tim, I'm sure you're making a lot of good contacts out here as well. People you haven't seen in a while, and meeting people you've never met.
Well, Kim knows, and you know that part of the thing is, today I had a conversation with Steve Moore, who I've known just like Kim for
Well, you know that Steve is now a movie star.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he made a great movie.
Yeah, by the way, his pay is like triple now because of it.
Oh, yeah, look out. He's going to want more benefits. But the conversations I have with people about the industry in general, like you, Rob Held, like everybody about, I mean, Kim talked to me about some of the e-capture tools and how I can probably rent some of those tools. Some of those conversations and relationships are worth the price of admission, just to come and talk in general.
And I'll tell you, I was out front, Tim, and there were some guys talking about the Amazon cloud service. And I just stood there as a fly on the wall, sucking information from these guys. And that's really what this is all about, right, Kim?
Well, it's networking, it's sharing ideas, it's meeting old friends, it's learning different ways in what we're doing. So if you don't come here next year, you're lost, because we're telling you now, this is a great event.
Well, and you can't beat the price.
It's free,
Well, and you said something today in your opener I want to ask you, and it certainly wasn't a knock on anybody. You said when you go to Legal Tech, you have X number of vendors that you look at, but when you come to Innovations, we've got you for 3 days.
Well, and that's the thing, the other shows for us, we're selfish, right? So when we go to Legal Tech and ILTA, we have to share all this great wealth of knowledge and talent. We have to share them with all of our competitors, and they're out trying to drum up business, etc. At Innovations, I kind of feel spoiled, because I get all these great people to us.
So that's Kim Taylor talking about the Topgolf kickoff and everybody that was there, and it was certainly a great time. We came back and started Tuesday morning, and what I want to discuss, Kim started off with who is iPro and what do they do, but then there was a speaker that came on from ESI Attorneys. Her name is Kelly Twigger. She lives in Boulder, Colorado. And I'm actually sitting at my computer right now, and I'm going to pull up her website just to so I can make sure that I give you the address properly to get in touch with her. But it's an e-discovery law firm. It's esiattorneys.com. And when you click the About Us section and you take a look at their team, Kelly Twigger is unbelievable. This lady, and she is a wonderful speaker. And so what I was able to do was record some of her talk. And so for the e-discovery people and the people that want to rehear some of what Kelly said, take a listen to this. And this was while she was speaking on the platform. I recorded some of it. We couldn't do the whole thing. There's no way we could do her whole talk on here. But we can certainly do some tidbits that were really good. So take a listen to Kelly Twigger, and then afterwards we'll get an interview with her.
Now, my job as a lawyer standing before a court is to be able to say that I took reasonable efforts to preserve information, to produce information. Whatever actions I'm taking, they have to be reasonable. That's the court standard. And the court standard of reasonableness is determined based on a large set of facts that happen. How was the organization running their systems? Were things really deleted, in the regular operation? Or did you just accidentally let someone leave the company and lo and behold, their hard drive got erased and that was the person that had all the bad info? So reasonableness is the standard. And I think that's important for all of us to remember, because when you are taking actions, and if we think back to how Lit Support thinks and all of that collection, you only need to collect what's reasonable, right? So again, think about those 10 custodians that you have. If 5 of them are the main people and they likely communicated with all 10, maybe you collect those 5 and you look at what you have. What's the universe of information that you have? Do you need more from those other 5 custodians? Can you not collect that other 7,500 gigs of data? Because that would be nice, right? Not to spend your weekend looking at that extra 100 gigs of data. This is a key statement. The Zuba Lake cases, if you're not familiar with that concept, were 5 decisions from Judge Shira Schindlin, who is sort of considered to be the godmother of electronic discovery, that she wrote back in 2003, 2004, and 5. And they became the basis of the language for the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure amendments that were enacted in 2006. And those rules were the first time that the federal rules had ever specifically provided for the discovery of electronically stored information. And this is what she said at that time. Perfection is not the standard. It's reasonable. Reasonable is what we're shooting for. Okay, so you have to remember that, because I'll tell you, perfection is the lawyer standard. That is our standard. That's what we do, right? It all has to be perfect. The sites have to be perfect. The way that we present the language to the judge has to be perfect. The way that the information appears on the Elmo at trial has to be perfect. Have you worked with a lawyer who isn't a perfectionist? Anyone? Right. Exactly. So this is the rub, right? Reasonable to perfection is not the standard, but it is our standard. So you've got to help them remember that, right? I mean, there is really no perfection when it comes to dealing with ESI, because there's always going to be something that goes wrong. Always going to be something that goes wrong. Managing the crisis associated with that really could fall to you in a better way than it could fall to the lawyers as to how they deal with that, what that means. So this is a model that I borrowed from my very good friend Ann Kershaw, who is the president of Knowledge Strategy Solutions out of New York. And I think that it's really interesting because it shows a lot of the process. Whoops, and it looks like my slide got kind of messed up in the translation. So I'm an Apple girl, and I create in Keynote, and then we export to PowerPoint, and this is what happens. Lawyers don't understand this process, right? You guys get this process because you put everything in the funnel. And you use the sieve part of it to clear everything else out, and you try to only give the lawyers what they need. But the lawyers don't understand this process. So the more that you can work with your lawyers to help them understand what you're doing, why information has to go in, what information doesn't have to go in, down to things like, look, there are 1,000 different file types on a hard drive. We only need these 10. So what we do is we put them through a program that gets rid of all those other file types, and we just keep the ones that we need. But then they have to be put into a format that can be read by the software you want to use to read them. There you go, you've explained it all, right? That's all they need to know. So they need to understand how you're getting from A to B, and they don't understand that. And they don't want to ask you, because the other thing we're not good at is asking questions we don't know the answers to. That is something they teach you in law school. Don't ask a question you don't know the answer to, right? That is a little bit contraindicated with electronic discovery, where most of us don't know the answers to any of the questions, including everybody sitting here, right? I mean, most of the time you're going, wait, this isn't the way it's supposed to work. Let me call iPro and see what's happening here. I mean, it happens every day, right? You've got 5-10 times a day where something happens and that's not really what happened. And so you got to go back and figure it out. That's not what was supposed to happen. You got to go back and figure it out. As lawyers, that just frustrates us. We get very frustrated by that. The legal process and litigation itself is extraordinarily complicated, and it is like a puzzle. And we are constantly trying to figure out, how do the puzzle pieces fit together, and where do I find the pieces? So I was trying to think last night as I was thinking about talking this morning, the best way to be able to explain the level of complication. Most everybody here supports litigation, is that right? Yeah? Okay. So the level of detail in any given day that a litigator is dealing with, take electronic discovery completely out of it, is, I can only describe it this way, it's horrific. It really is. And that's before you come into my office. So the level of detail that you have to present me with is also somewhat horrific. So when you combine those two, and the lawyer doesn't really know what you're talking about, it's difficult. So the reason that I tell you this is so that you can understand the mentality of the lawyer when they sit down to talk to you. And I encourage you, and we're going to talk about this process in a minute, to not have these discussions about how to pitch your services right in the middle of the case, but rather before the next case hits. Because when I'm thinking about this puzzle, I want to be thinking about all the players who can help me put this puzzle together more effectively. And you guys are a huge piece of that puzzle. By way of example, I just had a case recently for a client in which we wanted to know whether what the other side was saying before they filed a lawsuit was in fact true. They were saying that there were meetings between them and executives at my client, and that promises were made which in fact induced the other party to buy a company. And so they said, well, we met with you in May. Well, guess what? Data does not lie. So we looked at everything back through May, and we found out that based on all of the emails that in fact these parties didn't even start talking until August. There was literally no communication in May, June, or July. Not until the beginning of August were these parties even talking. right? So you know at that point that if the other side's making up stuff, that you're going to have a problem. So that helps you do an analysis of, okay, where are we? How is this litigation going to go? How am I going to advise my client now because the other side's making up stuff? So if they're going to make up stuff, they're very clearly going to file a lawsuit, and we should go ahead and get prepared for what it is that we need to deal with. That's the kind of analysis that helps me as a lawyer. And if I can call you and say, take this information, go to their archive, get this information, and I want to know the answers to these questions. And then you come back and you say, here are the answers to these questions. Here are the 5 other interesting things that I also found. And here are the key email chains that I think you should read because I think they'll be interesting. Right? That's what we need. That's what we need because we don't know how to ask all of the questions. So we have this big gap, right? Here's a visual. It's a pretty good visual, right? It's pretty accurate. So this is the gap that we have to bridge in order to be able to create this team. And what I am going to tell you is that I think you guys have to go pitch your services to the lawyers. You have to help them understand what you can do more than what you're already doing to help them do their jobs better. And I'll tell you that in this changing climate of legal services, that lawyers who can say to their clients at the end of a case, here are all the ways in which we improved our process to save you money in the discovery process, and here are the reasons that we got to where we did faster. Here's how we leverage technology to get through more information faster, to not collect so much information. Here's what we did with checklists and processes. Those are the clients who are going to come back and hire those lawyers again, right? That's business development. So it may be less dollars in the door to deal with less gigabytes of data and less project management time, but let's be honest, you guys are happy about that, right? You're happy. Less gigabytes, that makes me happy. These are business development strategies for you, and you can pitch that to the lawyers this way. So when I say plan your strategy, I'm talking about timing. I'm talking about what you want to say. And for me, the best strategy to talk to lawyers about revising the electronic discovery process, thinking of leveraging litigation support in new and different ways, and looking at examples of that, is when there's not a case, okay? Or when there's a lull in the case. The motion to dismiss has been filed and we're going to sit for 6 months while the judge makes a decision. Or, when you've got a great relationship with a lawyer and you know that you can sit down with him, but you need to have a plan. Okay, so you need to plan, and I often encourage, when I talk to litigation support departments, I encourage the department as a whole to come up with a plan. So, part of your plan is who's going to be the messenger? Who's going to go and talk to the lawyers, right? And you have to have the person who the lawyer respects, who the lawyer has worked with, that they value their work, okay? Because law firms are a weird dynamic, right? And I kind of see the same thing in corporations. There's this really obnoxious hierarchy that exists, and I don't like it at all. In fact, I used to feel like if my assistant wasn't going to be in the office that day, then I might as well not come in because pretty much everything depended on her. And so I've never really engaged with that hierarchy, but it exists, and rather than ignore it, we have to acknowledge it and work with it. So, who's the person in your organization? You probably already have somebody in your head who's respected, who people listen to, right? Who can talk to the lawyers. Who are the lawyers you're going to talk to, right? Who are the people that you can get the most bang for the buck with? Who's the one lawyer that you can get on board for the next case who can then talk to the other lawyers about the best way to do it? This is going to be a gradual process, right? Bridging this gap is a gradual process. And I do the same talk with lawyers from a different perspective, but it's a process that is going to be worth your while to engage in. So, step 3, you've got your plan. You picked out who's going to be the messenger. You need to develop some examples for how it is that you can help them. Think about your caseload right now. What are the types of cases that you have? You've sat at your desk and you've looked at the data and you thought, hey, if we could just use this, we could leverage this and I could be able to tell them X, Y, Z, but they're not interested in hearing from me, right? You have examples like that already in your head. Some of the examples, like I mentioned earlier, is to create a timeline of events. That is one of the first things that as lawyers we do. And we usually have to do it from printed documents, right? So a lot of the software that's out there, and I look at every software product that's on the market as much as possible, the timeline features are never as developed as I want them to be. You know, I'd like to be able to tag a bunch of information and say, create a timeline for me, and have it pull various fields of information and create an instant timeline, right? And then be able to move it around as if it's an Excel spreadsheet in a report. If you can create timelines for your lawyers using calendar appointments, email chains, whatever information you have, that has significant value. Immediately, I know who the players are, who talked to who, where they talk to each other, when, by what form of communication. That tells me so much. Showing relationships between custodians. Some of these examples that I picked out were data specific, right? So you're going to have your own examples. These are just a few of the ones that I came up with in putting together these slides for today. So showing relationships between custodians. Who was talking to who? I had a case once where there was a third-party marketing agency that was involved, and the custodian told me that they were involved, but there were only specific programs that agency was involved in which were actually relevant to the issue in the case. And so when I was looking at the data, I could see that there were hundreds of emails between my client and this third-party agency that were about other projects that she had told me weren't involved in the case. So I called her up, and I said, hey, Laura, it seems to me there are at least 10 or 15 other projects that you were working with this agency on. Can you confirm for me that these aren't relevant and we can move them, cull them out of the data set? And she said, yeah, absolutely. We got rid of, I think it ended up being about 15,000 emails, because they were over the course of 2 years, with one phone call, right? How can you do things like that? How can you work together as a team to be able to make those kinds of decisions? I mean, if you think about 15,000 emails, I do the math, just call it a simple $200 an hour and how many documents review, that's many thousands of dollars of reviewing those emails that are totally useless. Identify better search terms. We still have so many lawyers sitting in their office making up search terms. Please stop. I beg you, please stop. They make them up. I mean, I get calls from clients all the time. We need your help. We're supposed to come up with a list of search terms. Okay. Do you have any data? Do you know anything about how the other side manages their data? Do you know how their witnesses refer to the situation that you're talking about? Is there a project code name? Is there some specific language that they use to refer to this issue? Well, we don't know. Well, it's going to be pretty hard to come up with some search terms that are actually going to be useful. So start with data. Get some data. Tell your lawyers, hey, let's get a sample of data from our client, from the key custodian. Let's take a few months of their email and let's look at it. And let's find out what the search terms are. Right? I once had a client opposing counsel who wanted to ask for a brand of a beverage. Let's just, for sake of argument, let's just make it Sprite. Right? So they wanted to literally have all the emails that said Sprite. Now, if you worked for the company who made Sprite, how many times do you think Sprite would appear in those emails? So, we had collected the information, so I ran a search and I called them and I said, there are 1.4 million documents that say Sprite. Would you like them all? And he said, no, I don't want them. And I said, well, instead, here's what I did. I ran Sprite and we put together this search, and this is what I think you'll want, and why don't we give you that information, and then you can tell us if you want something that's broader than that. We call that sampling. We call that, iterative discovery. That is a process that's going to save a ton of money, and it's going to make everybody happier because it costs a lot less to deal with on the front end. Right? Nobody has time to review it on the back end, because we forget when we're engaging in discovery that there's another side, right? I mean, if you guys give me 1 million documents, all I can think is, oh my God, I need a vacation. I don't want 1 million documents. And I know that there's not 10,000 of those documents that are even remotely relevant to the case, so I'm going to have to figure out how to get from 1 million down to 10,000. So think about not just what your job is, but this bigger picture. What is the case for my client? What are we trying to do? I'm a team. I'm part of a team. I want to work with my lawyer to do the best that we can, and I want to think about what does the other side really want. Because then you can go back to your lawyer and say, hey, we're going to end up here with 1 million documents. There's no way other than that we've thought about, and we've sat down as a group and kind of figured out a way, but we've whittled it from 3 million to 1 million, and based on what we know right now, we can't get it to any less. Is the other side really going to want 1 million documents? What are they going to do with them? Do they have relativity? Is it a plaintiff's firm that isn't going to have any ability to review that information? And suddenly you're going to end up fighting in court about whether you just dumped a bunch of documents on them? All of those conversations need to happen, and you guys need to be front and center in those conversations. Creating standard privilege filters for a client. If you have clients that you engage in regular litigation with, then have regular privilege filters. I'm happy to talk with you after about some of the ways in which we construct those filters. But those are the kinds of simple processes that can save a huge amount of money that you can set up on the front end of your projects. Okay, so those are some specific examples. Does anybody else have other good examples that they use oftentimes that they want to share with the group? Anyone? Bueller? Okay. All right. We already talked about this as ways to further develop business for clients. I mean, to me, this is how you're going to sell legal services. People who are my age, we don't care that you worked with our predecessor for 20 years. We don't care. It doesn't matter to us. We're all about today and now. So the ways to develop further business for clients is to tell us what you're doing for me today, right? We're all, what have you done for me lately? So step 4, we've got some examples. You know who your pitch person's going to be. You have a strategy. How are you going to pitch your services? Here's my 2 thoughts. Coffee and lunch. Right? Hey, I'm going to walk downstairs and grab a cup of coffee. Do you have time to grab some coffee? Right? You do have lawyers that you work with on a regular basis, who you're friendly with, things like that. I really need to talk to you about something that we're thinking about for this case. Let's go grab a cup of coffee. If you're in the lawyer's office and you're sitting across from them at their desk, the conversation is very different. You're going down in the elevator. Hey, I wanted to talk to you. There are some really cool things that we saw when we were looking at the data. There's some really great ways I think that we might be able to help this case. And I wanted to talk to you about what it is that you're really looking for. Where does the case stand? What's the client's thinking on the case? Has anything changed? You know, you guys in sitting down in lit support, often you don't learn that, hey, the judge suddenly stayed discovery. Or, I know, exactly, someone laughs because you're like, yeah, we're still working on it. How come we don't know? That happens a lot. You don't know that we've just briefed a motion to dismiss and nothing's going to happen for 6 months, and the client doesn't actually want to spend any money on discovery because this judge is probably going to agree to a stay while the motion to dismiss is pending, right? These are things you need to know.
So that was Kelly Twigger from up on the stage, and she just had so much good information to give everybody. After that was over, of course, she had a booth. She was there talking with a lot of people. She was bombarded right after she came off stage, and I had a chance to go over and sit down and have a discussion with her to talk further about what she was talking about there. And so take a listen to the interview. This is with Kelly Twigger of ESI Attorneys. Kelly, I want to talk to you a little bit about your knowledge in e-discovery because your talk today captivated that audience. What about e-discovery do you find the most amazing or the most challenging?
The most challenging part I'll start with is that it's constant. Technology is constantly changing, and which means that the law in this area has to be constantly changing to keep up with it. And unfortunately, as litigators, as lawyers who are dealing with electronic discovery on a regular basis, it's a whole new substantive area of the law that litigators need to be familiar with when they need it while still being litigators. And so that makes it very, very challenging from a litigation perspective. What do I love about it? I love that it's constantly changing. You know,
Right.
There's new stuff. There's new social media platforms every day that get started using, and it's a constant thought process is different for every matter and every age of every custodian and the types of environments that you're in. It's constantly different. So it's fun.
Do you find that it helps you as a litigator? Do you find that it helps you to be as knowledgeable as you are about e-discovery versus someone who may hire a vendor and then they're at the mercy of that vendor and whatever that vendor says?
because they really don't know? Does it help you to have that knowledge?
Yeah, that's really the space that we fill, and that's really what we do at ESI Attorneys is act as discovery counsel for our clients. And so the challenging thing is not that providers are out to give false information. It's just that there's a knowledge gap, and the litigators or the paralegals or even the lit support professionals don't often know the right questions to ask to maximize the value of what the outside provider's doing. And the outside provider isn't often really brought into the loop to be able to have the information. So a lot of what we talked about today, bridging that communication gap to create internal, more efficient and effective teams, really works with outside providers as well.
And that was one hell of a gap picture.
Yeah, the Grand Canyon. It is. Well, I think if you ask most people, it's pretty reflective of where we feel like one side is all the way on the other side of the Grand Canyon. To be able to try and talk to litigators, lit support folks, and paralegals and lawyers. They just think so differently, right? Mm-hmm. Their spheres of knowledge and understanding are so different that bridging that gap is where we have to get to for e-discovery.
One of the things that you said that I absolutely love. Now, let's talk about your background a little bit. First of all, you're a lawyer. Mm-hmm. Second of all, you understand e-discovery. You know the EDRM. You get it. But one of the things you said today that struck, and I was like, I got to talk to her about this, is you said, I don't care what you did for our predecessor for 20 years. I care about what are you doing today. What have you done today?
Right.
How common is that amongst lawyers across the industry? Because you can speak as a lawyer. People come up and say, well, I've worked with so-and-so for 10 years. I don't care. Let's talk about what you're doing right now. How common is that? And people get stuck in that rut of what they've done in the past.
I think that it's changed a lot. General counsels are more my age now than they are 20 years my senior. And we are very much, everything is cost conscious, right? I mean, the big issue is, if you think about it from an in-house counsel perspective, I don't have the blank check that I used to have when it came to providing legal services. And in large part, that's because society has become more litigious and the cost of legal services goes up the same way that the cost of any service goes up. And so eventually, that has to stop, right? You always have unexpected things that you can't budget for in a legal department, but legal departments are now trying to have a better, more fixed understanding of what their costs are. And electronic discovery is now a higher cost in terms of dealing with electronic information. I don't believe that the cost of discovery have changed exponentially. I think they're spent differently than we used to spend them previously. But I do think that it's that box now. It used to be all relationship driven, right? I've been working with this law firm for 20 years and I will continue to work with that law firm. And I do think that now legal services are coming to the point where in-house counsel or even other lawyers who are just hiring lawyers say, I need to understand what the value is you're bringing to me and how much that's going to cost.
And they're that cost conscious at this point.
Yeah, I think they are. And they should be. Why wouldn't you be?
Right. Tell me more about ESI Attorneys. Tell me more about what you guys are doing.
ESI Attorneys is an e-discovery and information law firm, and we really operate in two different ways. We act as discovery counsel for clients in specific litigation matters, or as national e-discovery counsel. We have several clients that we act as discovery counsel across all their matters and be able to track metrics for them and help them manage that process better. And then we also consult kind of as you described the EDRM all the way across the EDRM from an information governance perspective and helping organizations really sit down, assess their risk, what kind of matters have you had, what are you looking forward to the future, and what is your process or plan in place need to be to manage information governance and electronic discovery as a piece of that effectively. And how do we do that? By working with IT and legal and the business to meet all of their needs, because a business's focus should be on its products, on selling. If we spend $10 more in legal, then we've spent how much it costs to make 10 of the widget that company sells.
Right. You mentioned Zubilek today, and it always comes up. And you said you started talking about reasonable versus perfect. Mm-hmm. Expand on that a little more. I of course, the listeners just heard it because I just played the clip.
Right.
Expand on that a little more.
Well, I think, what we talked about today is I mean, Judge Shenlin in the Zubilate case has recognized that perfection is not ever going to be attainable in dealing with electronic information, and it's never been the standard before in discovery. It's not the standard now. But what our standard is reasonableness. The rub becomes that lawyers want to be perfect.
Is that why, like, for instance, if you're going to ask an expert witness in a med-mal case, you're going to say, doctor, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, or have you formulated your opinions to a reasonable degree? Reasonable, not a perfect degree.
Right.
Not a 100% degree, but to a reasonable degree. Same standard?
Reasonableness has been the standard in the law for hundreds of years.
Who determines reasonable?
The judge.
And it could be different in different areas. I'm sure you've seen that.
It absolutely can be. It's all about a certain set of facts. There were a couple of folks that came over to the table a few minutes ago when we were talking about, a recent case in which the plaintiffs physically altered emails to come from a different email address in order to better their position in the case. And when you just hear those facts, you think, well, I'm sure the judge dismissed that case. But in that situation, Judge Francis in the Southern District of New York looked at all of those facts and said, yeah, that was really bad behavior. But I don't need to dismiss the whole case because they may have other evidence that will prove the theories of liability that are alleged. So instead, I'm just going to say you can't use that evidence for the purpose that you wanted to because you engaged in bad conduct. And I'm going to make you pay for, the costs that resulted as a result of that bad conduct, but we're going to move forward with the case. And so I think that every set of circumstances is different, and understanding the nuances of that is why e-discovery has become its own substantive area of practice.
Well, I think that it's amazing, too, another area you talked about, and you hit on it, and I just heard people in the room. I saw people in the room. I heard people kind of clap a little bit, and then I saw people shaking their head when you said, stop entering these search terms. Talk a little bit about the problem with search terms. You touched on it, but really hit that area with search terms.
It's weird because I think those of us who have been in e-discovery for a long time feel like we should have moved past this particular issue, and we still haven't. And some of the visuals that we use today, lawyers as dinosaurs and technology and lit support moving at the speed of light, and why those two things aren't working together. So what's happening now, and has been continuing to happen for forever, is that lawyers sit in their offices and try to come up with search terms to give to the other side so that they can narrow down a group of documents rather than actually looking at the data itself to help them determine search terms. And I think the example that you may have played the clip on was the Sprite, and being able to try and you have to think more creatively. You have to say, if I think of this term, what's the likelihood that this is going to appear a million times? You need to look at the data. Stop trying to do the work yourself out of thought process and just look at the data. The other place that we didn't talk about in the presentation, but is you have to ask custodians. And that's one of my standard interview discussions is, what are the ways in which you refer to this product? How do you refer to this project? What do you guys talk about? What are the shorthand things you use? If I'm searching your email, and I literally explain to them the process that we go through. I'm going to collect all your email, and I want to just get to these emails. How do I do that? What am I going to look for? What's in the subject line? Who did you send them to? What do you talk about? And use those as your search terms. And then look at your data first. Don't propose search terms to the other side until you've looked at your data. Or ask them to look at their data and give you a report of what they're seeing on search terms so that you can have a discussion. It's that cooperation that's supposed to be in what we're working towards in e-discovery.
Kelly, thank you very much for allowing us to talk to you. I know you got bombarded as soon as you came out because so far you have been the standout, and everybody came to you, and you're probably going to get bombarded through this thing. But thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. I certainly appreciate it.
It's absolutely my pleasure, Rob, and I really appreciate that iPros had me here at Innovations. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So that was Kelly Twigger, ESI Attorneys. Another just wonderful interview. And so right next to her booth during the first day of iPro Innovations, which was actually the second day, so this was on Tuesday, there have been a lot of LinkedIn posts and things about the Sedona conference, and I had an opportunity to sit down and talk with them. And so we're going to play some of that interview for you here, and this is the Sedona conference.
All right, back at another vendor booth here, iPro Innovations, iPro Tech doing their thing here in Phoenix, Arizona. As you know, we've gone around, talked to a bunch of people,
And now I want to talk with Kennedy Sorensen, who is with the Sedona Conference. And for those of you who follow iPro either on Twitter or on LinkedIn, you'll see that a lot of times they're promoting things that are going on with the Sedona Conference. Let's talk a little bit about what the Sedona Conference is all about, Kennedy.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. The Sedona Conference is a legal not-for-profit. We are primarily a think tank. So what we do is we get members from the bench and bar, as well as various experts in their area together to write consensus papers on cutting-edge areas of the law, focusing in antitrust, e-discovery, patent litigation, data security and privacy liability.
So one of the things that it says for the Sedona Conference is the mission of the Technology Resource Panel that you have is to provide input to the Working Group 1 on electronic document retention and production, or its special project teams when issues involving the use of technology or services provided by electronic discovery or electronic information governance service providers arise, and to help create tools and solutions that will benefit the entire marketplace. What does that mean to you?
So the Technology Resource Panel is a group of vendors, and our attorneys and judges can't spend all of their time getting up to date on all of this new technology. There's so much in the marketplace that it's often difficult to write papers accurately. So what the Technology Resource Panel does is they come in and they ensure that what is written in the papers is up to date, is accurate, and has that viewpoint that perhaps the attorneys and judges could not get themselves.
And this is nothing new. I mean, it's not like you guys are Johnny-come-lately, because, I mean, coming up on June the 7th and 8th in Berlin, Germany, you guys are going to have your 8th annual conference.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that. What are those conferences like, and who really benefits from those?
So in June, we are going to be in Berlin. It's our international program, and that's on cross-border discovery and data protection. So we are going to be discussing several different
program highlights.
We got program highlights, the new European Union General Data Protection Regulation, Safe Harbor 2.0. As we know, Safe Harbor is, no one really knows what it is right now.
Right.
We've got global data protection, discovery, and disclosure, how those emerging data localization laws are changing. Data protection and then discovery, disclosure, and global ops. So these programs, this international program in general, is beneficial to attorneys in the international space. And then all of our other programs focus on various areas of the law, e-discovery, antitrust, patent litigation, and those conferences are spread throughout the year in different locations.
Kennedy, you mentioned something right there that really interests me and I think interests a lot of our listeners, and that is the global data protection. Cybersecurity threats right now are huge.
Yes.
What are you seeing out there? This isn't like it was even 5 years ago. Would you agree,
Right.
Kennedy? This is something that needs to be... I think a lot of people have there's people who don't wear their seatbelt. And the thought is, it's not going to happen to me. It can't happen to me. How serious is this cybersecurity threat thing going on right now, Kennedy?
It's very serious, and like many people have said, it's not when or not how.
It's not if, but when.
Yes,
yeah.
that's the line. So it just helps to have all of your ducks in a row. Information governance, make sure you know where your data is, who are the gatekeepers. These things need to be in line for your organization because something is going to happen, and you need to be protected.
And what about the small mom and pop firms? And I hate to use that term, and I hate to call them boutiques because boutiques are big, but I'm talking, you've got 3 lawyers in a firm. They do personal injury and a little bit of medical malpractice. They're dealing with car wreck cases. I don't think they think about these things, Kennedy.
Unfortunately, a lot of the times they don't, and that needs to change. People need to step up. You're dealing with people's personal information, no matter what area of law you're working in, and that needs to be protected.
Do you guys see a lot of the cybersecurity attacks that are happening? Does the Sedona Conference find out about those? And the technology resource panel, are you able to know what's going on out here, and you hear about them, and then you guys discuss it and figure out ways to combat this?
I think that's the direction that we'd like to take the technology resource panel, to make it as cutting edge as possible. But that takes quite a bit of work, and our volunteer base is stretched so thin. As you know, the majority of people work full-time jobs as well as volunteering their time with the Sedona Conference. So definitely a direction we'd like to take it in.
What, of all things that the Sedona Conference does, what do you think is the most important or gives you the most satisfaction for saying, you know what, I enjoy doing this. This is something I like. What about it inspires you?
So I think just bringing together members of the bench and bar at a really advanced level is meaningful for all of those involved. I personally am more on the back end kind of operations of the Sedona Conference, and seeing these people come together and to be able to speak freely at our conferences without knowing that they're going to be quoted or maybe misquoted, for that matter. What happens at Sedona stays at Sedona. That is the Sedona rule. So I think it's great to just have an area where people can go to dialogue and reach consensus without feeling outside pressure.
How do people, if they're either interested in, maybe they have something that they can provide to the Sedona Conference, or they're interested in attending, coming, joining, what is the best way to do that?
So the best way, I would say, would be to research on our website. You can reach out to us at info@sedonaconference.org via email. Ask any questions. We're a very small organization. We've got 8 people on staff, so we'll get you answered and squared away.
Moving the law forward in a reasoned and just way. The Technology Resource Panel, the Sedona Conference, check it out. As she said there, you can find them at www.thesedonaconference.org, or reach out to them on Twitter. Follow them on Twitter at TSC Sedona.
You know, I've followed the Sedona Conference for quite some time, and it's always interesting to talk with someone from an organization and kind of get their take on things. So we had a great opportunity to speak with them. They've got a great relationship with iPro. So it was definitely a good mix there for people to be able to see different things going on in the e-discovery world and what opportunities were out there to learn. And that's one thing that the Sedona Conference does well, is they teach. And education in this industry is huge. As I left the Sedona Conference, I headed over to a booth that was hosted by a lady named Lori Noonan, and it was called Social Caterpillar. And as you know, everybody today is Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, everything is social. And the one thing that when I was watching the open of the iPro show by Kim Taylor, one thing that he said was, back in the old days, if you upset a client, if you pissed somebody off, they could tell 6 or 7 people. And really, that's kind of how it went down. Word of mouth has always been the best form of advertising. It's always been the killer. But now, when you upset somebody, they can tweet to thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that are on social media. Well, if that's the case, then when you do a good job, that can also get out there too. And so I talked with Lori Noonan, who has a company called Social Caterpillar. And this is some interesting stuff. Take a listen to the interview.
So we're sitting here at iPro Innovations, as we have been at for the last 2 days, and of all the vendors that we've wanted to talk to, one of the things that struck me is, as Karen and I, everybody knows Karen's my wife, and as we walked in, there were these cool pins that were like a stylus and a screen cleaner, and it's a little dude that looks like Charlie Brown with this spiky hair, and it was the very first thing that attracted me to the table. And as I got to looking, I saw the name of the company was Social Caterpillar. And 3 of the things that are on their brochure say get social, get noticed, and generate loyalty. And so I have the opportunity right now to talk with the owner of Social Caterpillar, Lori Noonan. Lori, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Tell us a little bit about your company. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing to benefit people in the social media world. And we all know that that is so important right now. One of the things yesterday, Lori, that was said that Kim Taylor had mentioned was that back in the old days, if you, for lack of a better term, if you piss somebody off, they may tell 5, 6, or 7. Now, if you upset somebody, they can tell millions. And I'm sure you deal with that. Tell me a little bit about your company, what you guys are doing, and why you're here.
Well, basically, my company helps small businesses promote themselves over social media. You bringing up a very good point is that obviously with even negative feedback, as long as you get in front of it and handle it over social media and take care of it and please that customer, then you can actually get ahead of it without, I guess, pissing off all those people that you said.
How important is social media at this point, in your opinion, as an expert in this field?
Oh my gosh, it's absolutely necessary. Absolutely necessary.
You see things like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Stitcher and Tumblr and Pinterest and all those things. We are in a social world. There's no doubt. In the last 5 minutes, you and I sitting here, I've received 3 texts. You've probably received 2 notifications on your phone. So everybody's doing it. But let's talk a little bit about why a company like yours is so important. Most people think, well, I can get on Facebook and do it myself. I can get on Twitter and do it myself. And everybody thinks they can do it themselves. Why would they need a company like yours, Lord?
Well, a lot of the small businesses are focusing on running their business. So what I do is I can come in and take care of making sure that you're posting regularly. What a lot of people think is, if I just throw up a Facebook and post here and there, that people are seeing it. That's actually very untrue, especially with the new algorithms for businesses that make it kind of almost impossible to now be seen in the social media world as saturated as it is.
Let me ask you another, and this is in my own curiosity.
Sure.
We have Ted Brooks and I on LinkedIn. We have the trial technology group that deals with people like me that are trial technologists that go in the courtroom and we do the pushing of the buttons. And we see people who post regularly, and when I say regularly, sometimes 2 and 3 times a day. And not only do they post something, they then have 5 or 6 people who go out and post the same thing on other groups. And one thing that always came to mind to us is they must not be very busy because they've got all this time to post stuff.
Sure.
You said you wanted to make sure that there's regular posts going out and that it meets the algorithms of what are out there for business. But there is a term that says content is king.
Absolutely.
Is that true, or is good quality and relevant content king?
Both. I mean, you absolutely have to have content relevant to your field, but it's also very nice to show, I guess, the culture as well. If you're going out to have a nice meal, it is kind of sometimes fun for the public to see where you're at, get to know you as a person, so it actually sets your business page as a personal page as well.
What makes you different from other people in the industry who are trying to do this? And I don't mean better, I don't mean worse, I just mean, what makes you different? Everybody's got to have something that's differentiating. What's different about Social Caterpillar?
Sure. Well, I'm very passionate about small businesses, so I actually do like to get to know the business owner and the actual culture of the business in order to promote it. So it's not just you sending me content and I'm just reposting it for you. It's me actually getting to know your business, and that's what I mostly enjoy.
Is there some type of a matrix out there that people can look at that show that a company like yours generates more activity and more views and more hits? Because if you'll remember, back when Google came out, every small business was bombarded by SEO companies who said, hey, we can get you at the top of the page, and when somebody enters this search term and things like that. Do you feel like this is kind of the same way, that the more you are active and the more relevant content you're posting, the more attraction there is to who you are? Because everybody wants to be seen.
Absolutely. Well, it becomes more of a natural SEO. So instead of paying for the search terms like you're saying, that Google is now increasing and increasing, all the different social media outlets now you're having to pay for advertising, right? This is a much more organic way to get the followers. So as you're posting, you are rising to the cream of the crop, sort of say, in the SEO.
Well, Lori, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what kind of a track record of success do you have doing this? How has this proven out to be, so to speak, for Social Caterpillar?
Well, I increase followers. I definitely also help increase sales. In turn, as I was saying, going back to the customer service aspect, is that we're making sure to be on top of any customer service issues as well. So making much happier clients in the end. And being in front of the negative feedback.
Sure. Tell the listeners of the podcast how to get a hold of you. What is the best way to contact you so that, hey, I'm interested in this, I need to up my social media game? What's the best way to contact you?
www.socialcaterpillar.com. You can email me at Lori, Lori, @socialcaterpillar.com, and reach out to me that way. Otherwise, also, of course, I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram.
So after our talk with Lori Noonan over at Social Caterpillar, we headed over to the Equipped booth. We've had Bob Rivas on the show before, but I certainly wanted to talk with Bob about some of their e-discovery tools and what was going on at the seminar and kind of his thoughts on the show. And it was good to catch up with Bob after we had him on earlier in the year. So as we're walking across here, we're getting to one of the vendors. We've had him on the podcast before, one of our best shows, with none other than Bob Rivas from Equipped. As we talked about on the show, they've got Matterpoint. Bob went into it. If you've not heard that show, go back and listen to it. It's certainly in the archives where he talks about Matterpoint. But Bob, as a vendor coming to Innovations this year, how's it been for you so far?
Very good, Rob. Thanks, man. We really enjoyed it. Bigger crowd than expected, and a lot of interest around infrastructure, around security, and whether or not firms and vendors should keep doing it themselves.
How has the reception been in the marketplace for Matterpoint?
It's been really good. What we're seeing is that the clients are demanding a lot more security questionnaires and RFPs these days, and it's really making clients look at their IT and have to make a decision on whether they want to stay in the IT business or outsource that as a service so that they can meet today's security questions and tomorrow's, which are even going to be harder than today.
And at that point, Bob had people coming up to his booth to take a look at Matterpoint and kind of see how that thing was laid out and all that. Equipped does some great work. I had a chance to walk in and listen to some of Matt Ritter. Matt was on the show. He's a comedian. He does legal comedy. And I got to go in and listen to some of his show. It was pretty good, but he's a lawyer as well. So I really wanted to talk with Matt about, e-discovery and kind of where we are right now and get his thoughts. And so I talked with Matt, and the way I want to close this show out today is you're going to hear the interview with Matt, and then I talked with some of the people after the show. I know the Salsa Challenge deal was fun. My wife and I were able to be judges of that, and it was great. But we talked with different people, and so I'm going to let the interviews that we had kind of play out. I tried my best to introduce the interviews as I was doing them. One we're going to talk about here in just a minute, too, is Doculogics. They've got some good stuff going on, and Doculogics is strictly for the litigation support field. And so we talk a little bit about that, but that's how we're going to close the show. But I want to let everybody know, iPro Innovations 2017, they're going to have a hard time topping this one because it was absolutely wonderful. I want to thank Kim and Bev Taylor for this whole thing. I want to thank Jim King. Everybody was just gracious as they could be to us and allowed us to record anything we wanted to. I wanted to have Chris Valasek on the show. He was the person who hacked the Jeep Grand Cherokees back when they were able to be hacked and they knew they had a problem. He spent an hour long going over that, and I actually, had some footage of that. And it was afterwards that I discovered his contract did not allow for any recording. And I tried to get an interview with him. He said that, he couldn't do it. So we weren't able to have him. He did Tales of a White Hat Hacker. It was a very, very interesting hour-long piece. But unfortunately, I can't release any of it. So take a listen to the last of the interviews, and hopefully, you learned something. You can visit some of these vendors. And thank you for listening to the podcast. So for the Litigation Support Trial Technology Podcast, iPro Innovations 2016, my name is Rob Helt. We'll see you next week, and listen to the rest of the interviews.
So, Matt Ritter, who left the legal industry as a lawyer, you were in big law, and then you decided to go into comedy and do some other things. You've done some writing as they introduced you for Duck Dynasty and things like that. What do you take away from something like iPro Innovations when you come to something like this and you see where things are going? I want to get into your comedy, definitely, but where you see things are going in the e-discovery world. Because like you said, you're 36 years old. You've seen this industry make the shift toward electronic discovery. Back when you were in law school, it wasn't as big as it is now, right?
Firsthand, I think adapt or die should be everybody's mantra in the legal field. I feel like law and technology were kind of averse to each other 10, 20 years ago for whatever reason. I just, just the way that it was set up, that's just not... I think also because there was, built-in heavy profit margins that maybe they didn't want to, head towards that way. But for whatever reason, the last 10 years has been an acceleration, in legal technology. And it's a fact of the world. If technology can do it better, it's going to. So you can fight it or you can get on board and figure out a way that, like, as a law firm, how is this going to enhance what we offer?
One of the things that really, when I knew that I wanted to talk to you even before the conference started was you're a legal recruiter.
Yes.
And there are a lot of recruiters out on LinkedIn. And the funny thing is you pulled up the Legal IT Network. And, of course, Ted Brooks and I have the trial technology and consulting. We own it. We're the admins.
So
we created
funny.
it. And, of course, I am a member of the Legal IT Network as well. And one of the things that we see a lot of is you see a lot of postings that recruiters are doing. Legal recruiting is different than any other type of recruiting in the country. What are some of the things that you see that people do wrong when trying to be recruited?
So from a candidate's perspective?
Okay. What do you see people do wrong?
So what I see people do wrong is they're all over the place. That's number one. And this isn't just for lawyers, but any adult professional who's really trying to get ahead. The more specific your skill set can be layered on top of each other. Like, for example, if you're a litigator, right? If you've done a ton of labor and employment, you should be selling yourself as a labor and employment attorney. And within that field, your resume shouldn't just say litigation, including labor and employment, blah, blah, blah. It should start with seasoned labor and employment attorney with wage and hour class action, blah, 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 blah.
So people try to go overly broad sometimes and
younger
try to be...
Younger candidates try to go overly broad because they're not ready to commit.
Right. Now you do a lot of e-discovery consulting.
Sure.
How much, for lack of a better term, we're all adults, how much BS do you see on resumes? And with people who claim to do something, they really don't.
So I can suss that out in like 30 seconds, and I have to, because I'm putting myself on the line when I'm submitting a candidate. So because I was a lawyer, because everybody at my legal recruiting shop were lawyers, we will suss it out in 2 seconds, If you say you've done finance, then I'm going to ask you about finance jargon or M&A jargon. And if you can't speak the talk, you're obviously, take it off your resume.
Right.
If you've done one public offering and you're calling yourself a capital markets attorney, take it off your resume.
Right.
So that's a mistake, because also, instead of trying to go for the 100 jobs that are potentially available to you, choose 3 jobs that you're really right for. I know that technology has made it easier to see more jobs, but seeing a bigger field doesn't necessarily, make the task of finding the right job, better for you. Just the fact that you can see, it's great that you can see more jobs, sure.
I think the one thing that concerns me, and I don't know how you feel about it, Matt, but the one thing that concerns me is when someone maybe scanned 10 documents in a massive tort case.
Okay.
For instance, the BP oil spill trial, which I was actually the trial tech for Halliburton, was there the full 17 months. But they scanned like 10 documents, and all of a sudden on their resume they put that they were involved in the in some mass litigation.
Right.
And it's like, you really didn't do that.
Right.
And I think as a recruiter, that would scare the hell out of me, because how am I getting the right? Have you ever recruited someone, you place them somewhere, and then that person's calling you in a week going, this guy doesn't, or this lady doesn't know anything about
So
what
I
they
never
said.
have, and also because I personally am invested in my job, I would never let that happen. But also my firm has protocols in place administratively before we even let anybody into our pipeline. So we're not just like taking a quick glance at your resume. We do phone screen, which is, like I said, my BS meter. Everybody I work with, their BS meter's up. You know,
Right.
if you say you were lead counsel on a Halliburton case, I probably already would know your name.
Right. If you're keeping abreast of what's going on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
what's going on
Yeah.
on Twitter, what's going on in those
So
things.
it is harder. I think it's the transparency is good. You know, I think all this basically transparency is good, and you know it opens up more opportunities. I think
Sure,
for people.
sure. Now let's move over to your comedy side.
Sure.
What made you go into this, man? I mean, what made you go into trying to stand up there and make 500 people in a room laugh?
I hope I made half of them laugh. So there's multiple versions of that answer, right? There's the kind of anecdotal, funny, half-true answer, which is that in 1979, my mother tried stand-up when she was 8 months pregnant with me, and she bombed completely.
Right.
And the MC told her she didn't have an ounce of funny in her whole body. So I've been trying to prove that person wrong for 36 years. And the truth is, that was on Long Island, and the MC was Eddie Murphy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I feel like there's like a weird thing
It's
there.
in your DNA.
Because he's always been like my idol too. So it's in my DNA slightly, but I was also the class clown at school or whatever. I always just had this nagging itch that I was meant to, it's obviously like a narcissistic complex defect, right? Every comic has two things, right? Just 50% narcissism, 50% masochism. You have to hate yourself, but also think you're so important
Right.
that you have to be heard. So whatever it is, I obviously have that inside of me.
Right. Well, how'd you enjoy the show so far? I mean, what you've seen, I know you've got a flight out.
Yeah, no, look, I think it's really cool, and I think you know, the lawyers who are not keeping up on this stuff and the firms that are not keeping up on this stuff are kidding themselves. Like, I have a friend from law school who sold his legal outsourcing company to Thompson's a couple of years ago. He was the richest guy at our law school reunion.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's if you're doing it the old way, the only way you survive is if you're Cravath or Wachtell. Everybody else, I mean, really, right? It's like you've got the top who can always manage to survive because they're always going to drag the, you know, whatever, Fortune 500 companies. But then you look at the Fortune 500 companies, once they turn over and they become tech companies, where are you if you're a white shoe firm that's not technology driven?
Right. Exactly. Well, Matt, thank you very much for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a safe flight.
Thank you. This was great.
So we're here, and it's breakfast time here on the last day of iPro Innovations. I'm here with Mike Sasser, who's in sales with iPro Tech. You have been with them quite a while. How long have you been with iPro, Mike?
I've been with iPro since July of 2014.
So what do you think about the conference, man? I mean, seriously, from a perspective of sales and from a perspective of meeting people, maybe people you've not had a chance to connect with, what do you think about the show?
Well, first, I'm really proud of the show. It's really grown significantly, even just since last year. As far as the utility of the show, it's fantastic. I think the people that attend, they actually get really good insight into our products that they probably otherwise couldn't get. And it gives us a great chance to build relationships and to just strengthen the collaboration between us.
And I'm sure, as with any conference, you learn things, you learn what's going on in the industry, and I'm sure you've picked up a few things from just customers in general that are out here that you've learned, hey, this is what the marketplace is looking for, or this is what the marketplace is needing. And for iPro, that's huge because it gives you the ability to say, maybe we see things a certain way, but now you see it from the perspective of the user.
Absolutely. You know, first the content of the program, of the tracks that are delivered. I mean, I actually gain product knowledge myself, but you're right with the feedback that we get, and we actually have sessions during the breakout hours that are designed specifically for customers to give us feedback on, you know, if the sky was the limit, what would we want? And, you know, the dev team, they listen to those things, and oftentimes they come to fruition. So, yeah.
Well, Mike, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it, and we'll see you again next year.
Good to have you, Rob.
Thanks, bud.
Thanks.
So we're here with Terry Vaughn, who is with DocuLogix. I'm guessing it's your company, your baby.
That's correct.
tell us a little bit. I want to talk about DocuLogix. I want to talk about what you guys do because, Bob Rivas with Equipped and I were just talking about how when you get in the space of legal software, things tend to get blurred because there's so many different people that do so many different things, but yet it seems like they say they do this, but they don't. They say they do this, but they don't. But one thing that DocuLogix seems to do, just from my research, is it's got a CRM built into it, and I want to talk about that real quick because on our show we've had 3 or 4 different guests that have talked about their CRM product. But no CRM has been really tailored to the legal field. There are billing apps, there are time tracking apps, but when you're talking about client relationship management, tell me a little bit about what DocuLogix did in the CRM area.
We have a lot of customers that we're using Salesforce.com and all of these other great tools, and those are great tools. Quite frankly, they have more features than ours, but what they lacked is the ability to tie back to the numbers. And since we're collecting the billables, we're collecting the number of jobs that are coming in, who's working on them, who's doing the ordering, all of that transitions over into our CRM. Our CRM is really simple, and it's designed directly for what we do as an organization.
And one of the things that you really, now let's get into the meat of the matter, and that is the PTS, which is the project tracking system. There really is no out-of-the-box solution for complete project tracking as well. One could certainly set up any kind of a flat file database that they wanted to set up, which 9 out of 10 of the small mom and pop firms, and I don't mean to be disparaging at all, but let me go into this a minute, okay? They can come out of the box with a flat file Excel spreadsheet or something that they think is a tracking software, okay? That's not designed for what is done in the legal field in the law firm. Number 2, you could use something like FileMaker, for instance, and one of their interesting template sources, which we all know is not going to work to what you need it to do specifically for the legal field, because what we're in and what we're involved in is completely different than any other segment out there. Then you have the time matters and those things that I have always said become shelfware for smaller firms because they're so robust and they have so many things that 90% of the users only use 10% of the features anyway. But with yours, your project tracking system was designed exclusively for the litigation support industry. This thing will track. Now, there are things that are out there certainly for lawyers, but some of the things that you list that you benefit are e-discovery, document review, copy scan, forensic investigations, demonstrative exhibits. Talk about the project tracking system. Take me through your baby.
All right. Well, it really starts with me being in the litigation support industry for 28 years. And, I was one of the original employees with Knight Ridder Overnight Copy Service. I started in August of 87. So I've been around a long time. I worked my way up to regional vice president of the Bay Area for Icon. And then in 98, I bought my company in Dallas, Litigation Solution.
Which was in the basement of the Bank of America building, which is where my office is now.
Correct. And so what we did is we found that when we were a copy company, it was pretty easy. You write down your meter numbers, you add it up, you put it on an invoice, and things were simple. Then we got into, of course, electronic imaging, and then we got into electronic discovery, trial boards. I mean, we did it all. And all of this was all done in different departments. And we found it very difficult to collect all of that billable information. So we started building a project management system that allowed us to collect the billables. And from there, the product sort of just taken off. And because we built it within the industry, we built it with basically what everybody else. I mean, if you go around to an event like this, we all started in the same place. You see so many people that you worked with in the past, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, heck, some of them 20 years ago. Kim and I go back that far. And so, the product has just sort of morphed with feedback from our customers. So 2.5 years ago, I sold LSI, and I really decided to just focus on this. Quite frankly, 28 years in the litigation business was pretty much enough for me. Our product's very complementary. You talked about some people with just the flat files. The customers that we bring on right now, some of them are tracking just with Excel spreadsheets. Some of them are using the old whiteboard up on a wall to track their projects. We've even had customers that have went and created 3 or 4 products that they built themselves. The problem is none of them really talk together.
Right.
And one of the things that ours does is we can track the media that's coming in, your evidence, your billables. It's got a time clock in it. The CRM's attached to it. And then we also even do the invoicing and the statements and receivables.
I want to ask you about that, the invoicing, statements, and receivables. Mm-hmm. Can we essentially say that you could be a solution or at least an add-on for some of the big box billing software, such as
Yes.
QB or any of those?
Yes. Everybody in our industry knows that the most difficult thing to do is collect money from a law firm. And so what we've tried to do is streamline that process. Most of our customers actually bill, create the invoice in our product. And then our product has an exporting function that allows us to export to QuickBooks, Peachtree, or any of the other accounting software packages. The thing is we can also track call tickets. Our invoices are electronically sent, so they can be electronically signed. Once they're signed, they're automatically uploaded. Customers even have a client portal where they can access their client portal and download PDF copies of any of their invoices, whether they're paid or unpaid, just from a history standpoint.
What about keeping track of all of my clients, Terry? What about, any type of contact management system that's going to keep track of all my customers, all my clients, everybody I've worked for? That's built in as well, correct?
Sure. Yeah. There's 2 ways to access clients. Obviously, we've got the CRM that's there. So from a sales perspective, you can access clients, and from there you can pull up quick reports based on the amount of work that you've been given, what type of work that you've been given. But then on just the basic production side, we can also track all of that. So from a management standpoint, we probably have 150 reports that are built in, and so some of those reports are based off of pulling information on clients, identifying who's using you, and identifying who hasn't been using you, so that if you pull up a neglection report, for example, you may say, well, this person hadn't sent me a job in 2 months, 6 months, or whatever. Gives you the opportunity to go see why.
Well, Terry, I've only got a couple more questions. I know you've got to get back to your booth. It's been a great show. Would you agree?
Yes, I've enjoyed it.
It's absolutely been great. Let me ask you this. What about... and don't let me forget to talk to you about the chat feature that you have now, because that's come out and that's brand new, and I certainly want to touch on it. But you're completely web-based, is that right?
That's correct.
So therefore, it does not matter the device. iPad, iPhone, iThis, eThat, my laptop, whatever. I can get to my
office,
stuff.
Outside of the office, traveling, yeah.
And the data's encrypted?
That's correct.
Okay. And let me ask you, some people choose to use a product, for instance, like Zoho. Let's just use Zoho as an example. Compare yourself a little bit to something that's as integrated like that as Zoho on a price area. Compare yourself, and we may be comparing apples to oranges, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but because people need to call and talk to you about pricing, because I'm sure there's levels.
Everybody, one of the first thing they bring up is how much is it going to cost me?
Right.
We're all in business to make money, so, obviously price is important. I can't really speak about Zoho because I don't really know their pricing, but, we do everything for $45 per license per month. We don't do contracts. You sign up, you use our product for 2 or 3 months. If you like it, you keep using us. If you don't like it, you turn it off at any time. All of your data is there where you can export it down, so we don't really we don't hold you prisoner. We feel like our product needs to pay for itself. I think we've got tons of customers out there that would agree with us, and so we understand this industry, and we're just trying to be a benefit to the industry.
Let's talk a little bit about a thing you've got going right now, which is the DocuLogix chat. It says it was designed specifically for the legal industry and its specific challenges. Tell me about what your thought is there, and what's this thing do?
Well, what we had is we had a lot of customers that came to us, and their original thing was they struggle with communicating internally on projects and externally with customers on projects. And, they're in a situation where 5 and 6 people are on an email string, Everybody's trying to communicate.
Things get lost in translation. How many of you missed on a forward? You know?
Right. And you've got headers that you're going through and footers that you're going through, and these conversations go on for weeks and months, and these email strings get 30, 45, or 40 or 50 pages long if you had to print it out. And we felt like there was a better way. So what we did is we built an instant message system within our PTS product. And so it is basically linear conversation, just like your text messaging. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, we have the phone app that if you connect via phone, it looks just like you're on a text messaging string. So what we've done with that is we initially looked at a third-party product to bring in to create an instant messaging. There's tons of them out there. There's a couple things that we realized that they didn't do. Number one, we couldn't tie them back to our database, so we couldn't tie a conversation back to a firm, a case, or a project, and we felt like that was crucial, being able to keep up with it. In situations where your project managers are dealing with your customers and they're communicating about a job, if that project manager leaves, sometimes it's very difficult for the other people in the company to figure out what's going on. With this, we go back to the project, we search all the conversations, we pull up, anybody can read what's going on with that communication. The other thing that the other products didn't do is they didn't go outside of the instant message system, meaning they created accounts, or you had an administrator, they create accounts, and you have 40 people in your organization, you have 40 accounts. But if you wanted to communicate with your customer outside, there was no way to do that unless you gave them an account and they had a username and password. With our system, what we do is you just add their email to the conversation. We send them an email, and we embed a link into that email that allows them into the conversation. So now you can communicate with outside people.
And that doesn't cost me as the person who's paying the $45 a month per license. That doesn't cost me a whole nother license. That brings them in as a collaborator. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, there is an extra charge for our chat software on the inside. But anybody on the outside, any free license is what we call it.
It's a collaborator, so to speak. Like if I had a paralegal that I'm communicating with that I need to bring into this, we can do that.
That's correct.
Well, Terry, tell me a little bit of how to get in touch with you. What's the best way for listeners to say, hey, I'd like to check that out, I'd like to try it? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
The simplest way is to go to our website, Doculogix.com.
And that is with an X, DOCULOGIX.com. And responsive, I'm sure. Your customer support is there?
Yes. I mean, we, matter of fact, we get complimented on our customer support.
Well, that is awesome. Well, Terry, thank you very much for talking with us. Hopefully we'll see you at Innovations again next year, and I'm sure you've had a good time this year.
Yeah, this is my favorite.